last week, we noticed that in the Iowa legislature that there was a file that was there, 153, that was proposed to bring baseball back to Iowa State and UNI, and that was brought by Republican Representative Skyler Wheeler. We talked a little bit about it. I reached out to Representative Wheeler, and he joins us now on the Rush Radio Show. Good morning, Representative. How you doing?
Morning, guys. I'm tired, getting up a little earlier than usual, but happy to be on.
Thanks for doing this with us, man. We greatly appreciate it, Skyler. So let's first get to know you a little bit, man. Where are you from? You an Iowa boy?
So I grew up in Washington State, was born and raised basically in Olympia, Washington. Ended up going to community college out in Aberdeen, Washington, so the home of Kurt Cobain. If you know anything about Kurt Cobain, Aberdeen, Washington Kurt Cobain reflected Aberdeen, Washington pretty well.
Okay.
Had multiple offers to like NAIA D2 schools, but there's not really a whole lot of them out kind of in the Pacific Northwest. So I find, start getting these schools in the Midwest that reach out, and, some of them have easy names like Northern State and South Dakota, and then you get a Dort or a Waldorf or a Northwestern or a Doane, and you're like, who the heck are these guys? So, you start looking through it, and I just wanted to continue playing baseball and ended up selecting Northwestern at the time. They ended up winning the GPAC, and they ended up making a national tournament that year. And so I came out, next thing you know.
Now, hold on. Now, stop right there. Later. Stop right there. When you agreed to go to Northwestern, did you know that you were going? Did you know what Orange City was?
I had no clue about anything. I literally looked, and I actually had a buddy who had no connection to Iowa either. He was from just south of Seattle. He went out after JUCO. He was a year ahead of me. He ended up playing out there, and he just talked about how much he loved it. But I got out here, man, and I just remember running and doing cardio and things outside, and I'm like, the humidity was killing me. I'm like, what is, this is a totally different climate. People were super nice, and you're like, wow, that person didn't yell at me when I almost hit him with my car. So it was just a very interesting experience. And here I am 11 years later in the Iowa legislature.
How did that, so explain to us that, before we get into the file 153,
sure.
How did the political world start for you?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I studied politics at Northwestern. I ended up getting a job after I graduated with our local newspaper. We have a regional newspaper in Northwest Iowa. It's not daily; it's every Saturday, and they have different papers for different cities that they'll do like on a Wednesday or Thursday. So I ended up working for them, and just started to get connected politically through that. And next thing you know, kind of the guy that was in the seat that had Orange City and most of Sioux County. He was an older gentleman, and he was just like, hey, I'm not going to run again. And so I took a shot. I was 22. So you don't know any better when you're 22. You're like, all right, sure, I can do it. And then next thing you know, I got in.
So you have you've put file 153 in the Iowa legislature, and that's to bring baseball back to Iowa State and UNI. On the surface, great idea. But with these universities, baseball is a major expense. Why propose this when there's going to need millions of dollars, especially from an Iowa State standpoint, and probably just as many millions from UNI to even make this happen?
Well, you propose it to have the conversation. It's done exactly that. People are talking about it. You wouldn't believe the amount of former players or people that, have just a general interest that have reached out basically in the last week or so. Just last night before I went to bed, I had 2 more emails from guys that played at Iowa State. And they were like, hey, I'll move mountains. I don't know, these guys' backgrounds. I know there's a few that are wealthy that used to play. But they're like, hey, I'll donate, I'll do this, I'll do that. So, there's people that obviously are passionate about it. I coach high school baseball up in Northwest Iowa. This topic comes up regularly. When you're just talking to other baseball coaches and things, it's like, man, I'm a huge Cyclones fan. I wish I could watch the Cyclones or whatever it is. So, yeah, but to your point, the obvious conversation that becomes, what's it cost for the facilities? Are you adding girls' sports? There's a lot of other logistics there. But as a legislator, and you'll see it every year if people pay attention to the Iowa legislature, we file legislation left and right that, might just be one sentence like this one is, where it's a lot more conversation that has to take place. But it accomplished exactly what I was hoping it would accomplish, which was, oh, wow, now we've got some conversation. What, is this workable at all?
What is the reaction right now? Do you think this is workable? Do you have an idea of how much this would cost UNI and Iowa State?
Yeah. So I've talked to President Nook in the past about it in kind of a lighthearted manner. I deal in all education in the legislature. I chair the education committee. I sit on the higher education committee. So we've, regularly worked with the regents on numerous different things and what's, on their budget as just an operating, school. In passing, I've mentioned it to Iowa State as well. There's different things that are out there. I found it interesting. I did a couple interviews with like the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. I did one with the Council Bluffs newspaper, and they reached out to both the athletic departments at UNI and Iowa State, and they didn't comment on it, which I found to be interesting. So some of the work that I've done just to research on the side, like what would this cost? What do you need? What's the facility? What's the operating expenses? I think one of you guys mentioned earlier, UNI would be obviously cheaper than Iowa State would be. But the numbers are kind of all over the place. If you look on Twitter, everybody on Twitter apparently has it all figured out. All the different trolls have all
Welcome to the internet.
Ideas, right. So it's interesting, but and I've reached out even to some coaches that I know that are different levels in college too, and just kind of said, how do you make your arguments? How do you justify being a small NAIA school? How do you justify that to your college, for instance? And so it's been an interesting conversation, but we'll see. I mean, the regents haven't necessarily engaged in the conversation yet. And, yeah.
Well, being a Republican, which you are, a lot of Republican belief is smaller government, less government overreach. Do you think this is government overreach? And would you put tax dollars to this? Or are you just saying, hey, we want Iowa State and UNI? Because a lot of people are asking now, hey, public schools are getting defunded. How much tax dollars would you anticipate going towards something like this, if it even got as far as you want it to go?
Yeah, so public schools get almost $4 billion in the state. They're the biggest expense to the state. K through 12 education is. It's about 43% of our entire budget. So anybody arguing it's being defunded is not making a logical argument at all. The numbers just don't agree with that whatsoever. No, I'm not looking to put tax dollars to it. There are some states that do some kind of funny things. Florida's got a little bit. I think Oregon uses I'm trying to remember if it's gambling revenue to some degree to fund some of their women's sports. I have had proposals brought to me by, I would say, conservatives that want to use a form of the sports betting money for NIL for our schools. And I'm like, well, once you open that cage, you're going to be opening it to, what are you going to say, the community colleges or whatever else it might be.
Yeah.
So you have all those different things. Is it small government? I mean, we regulate the regents on everything. I mean, we have control over them overall as a legislature. They have the board of regents, but the legislature has, authority. We take action on numerous things. We found that they were spending $10 million as Regents universities on DEI, for instance. We found that were spending multiple millions of dollars on different classes and things that we just felt were not appropriate for the state of Iowa, and we took action on those. Am I looking to, force the universities to do this without an answer? Of course not. And I've had that conversation with them behind the scenes that we're not going to put them in a bind or tie their hands. But I did want to start the conversation and had the conversation in behind the scenes with them and thought, you know what, there are enough people out there that find this to be an interesting enough topic that here we go, file it. It took about 20 seconds. I love when people are like, oh, we have other things to worry about. It took me 20 seconds to request that bill. Literally typed in, bring baseball back to Iowa State and UNI. Done.
Do you expect it to go anywhere? Seriously?
Yeah, so I'm going to have a subcommittee, which is a public hearing on it. And like I said, the bill, basically the inner workings, if you don't follow politics, when you file a bill, it goes to a committee, and then the committee chairman makes the decision. So if I really, really, really wanted to force, everything to go my way, I would have just filed it in my own education committee as a chairman bill, and I didn't. I filed it as a personal bill. I wanted to make sure that it was a personal bill. But we're going to hold a public hearing on it and look forward to hearing from the universities and continue to have these conversations with them. I want them to be successful, but also at the same time, there are people out there that feel passionately about this, as you guys have seen.
Skyler, do you have any indication from the universities yet what impact this would have on the actual athletic department? And you kind of leaned into it a little bit earlier. Some people have said this means you're going to have to add women's sports. It might mean you have to take men's sports away. Have you gotten any reaction from them or any feedback from anybody in the know what that solution might be?
Yeah, so some of the conversations I won't get into. Like I said, I talked to President Nook on the side, and he was never like, oh, no. I mean, he's like, we'd love to, right? But there's obviously things we have to work through. The conversation on the side has really been with them. They would want to see it advance or become a little more serious in order, I think, for them to start to come to the table and say, here's what we have here, here's what we have here. When I do research on like NIL, for instance, this is one topic that's been brought up to me even back home. And people are like, well, I don't want to affect, Cyclone basketball, whatever it is. I agree. I'm actually a Cyclones fan. Baseball does not suck up much of NIL. These guys are looking to try to get drafted. They're looking to try to, get their opportunity to go in the MLB to make the big money. They're not going to make that money in college. Even the SEC, which has, a great following for baseball, it's just not much for NIL down there. They're looking to see who's going to develop me the best to give me the best shot to, play at Fenway or something like that.
You mentioned you coach high school ball. You still playing like a wood bat league or anything like that?
I wish. Too busy. I mean, just to do high school ball, and I love coaching in the summer. Too busy, though. I mean, I don't have enough time to do that. I got a young family.
But do you ever just flex on J.D. Slotton and be like, dude, I would take you deep?
No, I've told him before. We actually had a softball game against each other this summer. We each homered in it. But I told J.D., I was like, man, you should have been on this bill with me. And he was... you have to have him on some time to talk about it. I mean, we're in different districts, for instance. We're in different parties. He's in I would just say a tighter district. He's probably got to watch himself more. I'm in a very Republican conservative district.
Yeah.
And, even my local newspaper wrote about it this weekend, and I had people that were like, "Oh, that's awesome." There is a local, there's a local league. So like up in Larchwood, they play over in like the amateur league in South Dakota and things like that. But I wish. I do flex on the kids sometimes in high school, though. When we're taking VP outside, I will take a bat and try to launch on them, and it's pretty fun.
You've mentioned the positive that you've heard. What's the negative have you gotten much pushback?
So yeah, from the Hawkeyes fans, they seem to hate it. they're just immediately
really
like, no.
Because they feel like they have a monopoly on it and they don't want that.
That would be my assumption. I think some are just trolling, right? It's Iowa State and UNI, and they just like probably the biggest thing to me, and I don't want to just chalk it up to this to try to not have the argument. I'm more than happy to try to have the argument. I think some people just don't like baseball, and they're just like, nah, screw it, that's stupid, right? And so some of them have been honest about it and just straight up said it. And then, like I said, you have the people that are like, oh, we should be spending our time on other things. It's like I share education. I have my time spent on a lot of other things. I did this like midnight. Really requested it like right before I went to bed. All right, bring it back. I mean, it doesn't take much time. So, but what you guys have brought up is the conversation is like, all right, we don't want to tie our athletic department's hands. So is it workable? This is not something I'm going to file, but like I would kind of assume, I think you and I was talking about bringing girls or women's wrestling. It's popping up. I know in my area, girls wrestling's become super popular.
Yeah.
So I imagine they're going to have those conversations about adding those sports in the future. So, yeah.
Well, good stuff. Thanks for so how long does it take this to go? I mean, is this like a 2-year process, a 6-month process, or, is it just this legislative session?
Explain the state funnel to Travis.
Yes, because I don't get it.
So, the state, you have a bill, you go into a subcommittee, which is 3 people, and then it goes through a committee, then it has to pass the floor of the House, and it has to do that whole same process in the Senate. But not everything has to be fixed with a legislative bill. Sometimes a legislative bill can fix things on its own, and you can have conversations behind the scenes or try to kind of work it in a different way. So it can be a process. That's why everybody talks about, we have all these laws and all these things. It's like, they didn't just happen overnight. Some of this stuff takes years to actually get there. I could think of numerous things that people are still trying to do. And every bill, there's no bill that I can think of off the top of my head that in its first form, if it has become law, is, in that same form. It always changes. You have 150, count the governor, you have 151 people with pride that have, opinions that want to be able to insert their opinions into different legislation. But I've enjoyed it.
Skyler, give your percentage. What do you think this thing actually gets all the way through that process?
So I'm one of 151, so do whatever percent that is. I would hope JD would vote with me.
At least going in,
At least you're realistic about it.
I mean, let's be real. There's like 2,000 or 3,000 bills filed every General Assembly, so every 2 years. I mean, only couple hundred of those, maybe 300 ever become law.
Yeah.
And some of those are very small things. But again, here I am talking with you guys. Here I am talking.
It got us going. I learned your name because of this. So.
Well, and it wasn't just to get my name out there. It's
I
got
understand
alumni
that.
and stuff. It's like, hey, these guys are, and I did find through this, there are some wealthy guys that played at Iowa State that, are pissed. Sorry for the language, for lack of a better word. And have said that they've had this conversation with Iowa State in the past, and That's the one I hear the most about is Iowa State, not necessarily UNI. I did fail to mention my college hitting coach at Northwestern was a UNI. He went to UNI. He was drafted at a UNI and played in the Pirates organization. He's now the head baseball coach at Morningside. I haven't heard from him, though. I was waiting for him to say something. He didn't say anything, so maybe he's disappointed in me. I don't know.
He's busy. He's busy. That's what it is, Skyler.
I guess they are gearing up. They're going to be playing soon, so.
Well, you know, it's a long shot. I think we can all agree with that, but it does start the conversation. I love college baseball. I live in Omaha, right? So I get the College World Series every single year. I know the passion of college baseball, but I also know the real dynamics of college athletics and the expenses that go with it, plus Title IX. It's an uphill battle, but you're right. If you've done one thing, you've started the conversation. And we all know your name now, and we know your high school baseball. Where do you coach high school baseball at?
Unity Christian up in Orange City. So we're
Okay.
a 2A school. They're growing a little bit, though. I got to tell them, hey, I don't know. 3A is a different level, man. Like, you gotta hang out at the
You'll
2A
be
level
all
for a
right.
bit.
You'll be all right.
Representative
Thanks
Wheeler,
for giving us time, man.
we appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.